Hello. In this video, we're going to look at the survey average report. And the survey average report really starts by looking at three numbers. The first number we're going to look at here is this column for Your Survey NES. And NES stands for Net Engagement Score. And the Net Engagement Score is just a number that you can use to summarize your question and boil that down to a single number. You calculate that by taking the number of people who answered 5 on your survey for this particular question, subtract from that the number of people who answered 1 or 2 on this particular question, and then divide that by the total number of responses. So that will give you a number somewhere between -1 and +1. And so I've created a separate video that explains that net engagement score and why we use that. I'll put a link to that in the description to this video. So the first number we look at is the net engagement score of your survey. And in this case right here, the building I mostly work in is clean. This school's net engagement score for that question was 0.091. The next column over here to the right is the average survey NES. And so this is calculated the same way, but what we do is we put all of the responses to all of the surveys for this one question and calculate the net engagement score for that. So when you do that, the average score for all of the surveys was 0.195. And then the final column here is just saying that this number will be negative if your survey was lower than the average. This number will be positive if your survey was higher than the average. And this is just telling you how far from the average it was. The graph over to the right is kind of the visual representation of those three numbers. The first thing we're going to look at is this colored bar right here. This is the representation of your score. So this 0.091 is represented by this circle here. The base of the bar, where it starts, is at 0. Remember, this number can be negative or it could be positive, but the base is always 0. So when the score is positive, the bar moves to the right. If you go down here, when the score is negative, the bar moves to the left. But that base of that bar is always going to be 0, which gives you kind of a point of reference there. And then it's just going to be further away from the base based on how far from your score it is. So the blue diamond represents the average survey NES. So you get to see kind of a visual representation of how far away from the average your score is. The last thing to mention here is that the bar will be red or green, depending on if your score is higher or lower than the average. So for this one, the 0.091 is lower than 0.195, so the bar is red. It's important to note that the bar can be negative and green, so bullying is not a problem in this school. This survey has an NES score of -0.182, but the average across all schools is -0.325, so this school's NES is higher than the average. So the bar goes to the left because it's negative, but it's green because it's higher than the average. So just let you know that that is possible. So those are pretty much the elements of the report. It goes through and lists how your school did across all of the questions here on the survey. The way to use this report, and I really think this is one of the most important reports that you can look at when you get your survey results. And the reason for that is that you'll notice that these blue diamonds really do jump all over the place. Sometimes they're way to the right and sometimes they're way to the left. And what that tells me is that some questions will tend to always be high, or some questions will tend to always be low. And so it's very difficult sometimes when you just look at what was your score to know if that's something that you should be focusing on, if that's something that you should be worried about. And this report really helps you to do that. For example, I think this is a good example right here. This student alcohol and drug use is not a problem in this school. This survey had a score of 0, exactly 0. But the average score is -0.253. So this school has higher, 0.253 higher than the average. And so when you're just looking at your scores, this is 0. Looks like it might be concerning, but when you consider the fact that all schools really struggle with this, and that this school is actually doing significantly better than all schools. This might not be something that you would necessarily focus on in your particular school. But you can kind of see, this one right here, discipline as a school is fair. This school had a score of negative 0.364. The average is 0.094. So this school has 0.458 lower than the average. So this might be something that this school would want to maybe focus on and do that. And so you can kind of see where the average is and where your school compares to that. Here's another great example. Teacher pay is commensurate with industry norms. The average score on this across all surveys is negative 0.557. This school has a score of negative 0.091, which again sounds low, but when you consider that it's so much higher than the average, it might not be something that you would necessarily focus on. So one of the things you can do is really kind of look at this column of difference from average, find the numbers that are really low, negative 0.48, that's kind of low. Find another one here. These negative 0.239, negative 0.273, those are probably possible areas where your school would want to focus this year to make improvements. And that's another thing that you can do with this report here, is when you do look at your survey, I do hope that you find particular questions to focus on, you implement some improvements, and you look at those scores next year. But what this allows you to do is pick a goal, a target score that's reasonable. And so if you wanted to look at discipline at this school is fair, and you say, at this point 364 is lower than we want, what's a reasonable score to shoot for? Well, I think this 0.094 is a reasonable score to shoot for, since that's just the average of all of the surveys. So that is the survey average report. If you have any questions about this report, or really any of the services we provide, please don't hesitate to reach out at milliganschooldata@gmail.com. Thank you.